Picture this, a young adult who had grown up in an extremely Italian family, eating all sorts of food and delicacies packed with gluten and carbohydrates. She was in peak physical shape with no health concerns or other similar issues. Until she suddenly develops an extreme intolerance to gluten, so much so that she can't even stand to have it on her plate or be in its general vicinity. Why does this occur? What shift happened in her body that caused such a dire change? This may be a crazy scenario for you and me, but for Renee Schmalbach, it was and still is a reality. Welcome to the Not So Late Show with Ava Schmalbach, and on this not so late night, we are going to be exploring the reality of Renee and many others, and it starts with a little something professionals like to call celiac disease. Now, what is celiac, you might be wondering? Celiac, to put it simply, is an autoimmune disease that prevents people from digesting gluten properly. You see, our small intestine, an organ located between your stomach and your large intestine in a prime spot of the body, has one function and one function only: to assist your body in absorbing the nutritional components from your food and distributing them throughout the body. It acts like a filter, keeping and utilizing the beneficial ingredients while discarding the ones unused. Said filter acts as a form of defense, making it so no harmful bacteria can make their way into other areas of the body. So, as you can imagine, the small intestine is of great importance here. One part of the small intestine that comes into play here is the villi. The villi is a lining, sort of like mini fingers, that wrap around the small intestine. When these fingers latch onto nutrients flowing throughout the small intestine, they make the small intestine larger and collect more nutrients to distribute throughout the body. As the villi layer grows and collects more nutrients, so does the small intestine. Without the villi layer, the small intestine would be incapable of performing some of its tasks as efficiently as it does for you and me. Finally, for the last piece of our little anatomy lesson, I must mention the mucosa. The mucosa is essentially a skin-like lining around the small intestine and other various parts of the body. It is simply there to protect our organs by providing another layer of protection. Now, in case you need a recap, we have our three crucial components: the small intestine, the villi layer, and the mucosa layer around it. Celiac occurs when the mucosa layer is broken until it eventually leads to inflammation of the villi layer and causes numerous issues, like, most notably, the small intestine shrinks and it can't carry out its work. Or if it can, it becomes a lot more challenging. In its weakened state, the small intestine can no longer handle gluten, a type of wheat crop found in lots of foods. What causes the mucosa layer to break down, you might be asking? Well, a variety of things. Stress and large abrupt environmental disruptions, pregnancies, infections, surgeries, or medical procedures, etc. are all causes of the disease. Maybe even the body just reaches a breaking point with the large amounts of frequent consumption. Now, what is a disease without a diagnosis? The diagnosis process when it comes to something as serious as celiac is performed with something called an endoscopy and various blood tests. An endoscopy is a small tube that doctors maneuver around a patient via the mouth. This procedure happens under anesthetics and pain reducers, of course. Endoscopies allow professionals to examine into the inner workings of the body and peer into the small intestine. Another way that doctors can diagnose celiac is, as I mentioned prior, through blood testing. Typically, when someone unknowingly has celiac and continues to eat their standard diet, gluten levels are high. Most times, when doctors observe such high levels of gluten in the bloodstream, it is easier for them to pinpoint celiac as the cause. Diagnosis is important, as undetected celiac can lead to dire consequences. Statistically speaking, 1 in 100 people has a form of celiac, and 80% of those people have been misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. To put those percentages into perspective, if I put 1,000 people in a room, 10 of them would have celiac and only 2 of them would know. Another thing you may not know is that celiac disease is hereditary, and 5% of celiac patients are closely linked with the disease via genetics. Now you may be thinking, how is celiac cured after it's identified? Well, unfortunately, because of the nature of the disease and the way that it is contracted, celiac has no cure. One can only combat the disease by living a gluten-free life and dieting to ensure no run-ins with gluten. Speaking of lifestyle, the next aspect of celiac we are going to be exploring is all about life post-diagnosis. Between hidden gluten and cross-contamination, making the shift in diet can be extremely challenging for many. You see, for most celiac patients, celiac can bring on various autoimmune diseases in addition to celiac. These autoimmune diseases can include type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, a long-lasting and damaging autoimmune disease where the body essentially attacks itself, anemia, a condition where the body doesn't receive enough red blood cells and is often tired or worn out, etc. One of the biggest challenges that arise with celiac is cross-contamination, or the act of unintentionally transferring harmful traces of one substance onto another. Cross-contamination can be a celiac patient's worst nightmare, whether it be fast food that becomes unstable because it was fried in the same oil as a piece of breaded chicken, or if someone preparing food doesn't wash their hands or utensils after using it in a dish with gluten. Another part of living with celiac that I will explore today is accidental run-ins with gluten. While most celiac patients successfully avoid gluten, errors aren't impossible. If one of said errors happens, a variety of outcomes could happen based on the severity of the celiac. For some, it could cause a mere stomachache or trouble digesting, but for others, it could bring on a trip to the hospital. Now, on the topic of celiac struggles, let's move on to our next part of exploration: complications. Now, I could list all of the complications that come along with celiac, and believe me, there were a lot. But I feel it would be more authentic coming from someone who has lived with these challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Renee Schmalbach. Oh, sorry, I'm getting some ringing. Hello? Hey, today it's looking great outside, and there's a 100% chance it's not already raining. First of all, this is a talk show, not a news channel. And second of all, we're talking about celiac. Oh, right. That's why I have this note card and this random lady sitting next to me. Renee Schmalbach, right?
Right.
All right. I have a few questions to ask you, if you don't mind. First of all, can you tell us where your journey with celiac began?
My journey with celiac began back in 2011 when I was pregnant with my first child, my daughter Ava.
Alrighty. And when you were diagnosed, can you walk us through the diagnosis process?
When I was pregnant with Ava, I was taking a multivitamin. That's very common that pregnant people take very strong multivitamins. When I would go for my routine blood work, I was actually losing weight and I was developing different types of vitamin deficiencies. That's when they started realizing that something wasn't right during my pregnancy. So I ended up spending a few days in the hospital because I was very sick. I was very dehydrated. My sodium levels had dropped, and they were confused why I was taking a multivitamin but yet was so vitamin deficient. So after lots of different testing and blood work, they were able to determine that my body had an autoimmune disease known as celiac.
Alrighty, thank you. And can you walk us through some of the complications that came with the celiac?
The complications I had when I was first diagnosed with celiac was definitely the vitamin deficiencies. I felt very weak. Here, every time I was putting food in my body, and there's traces of gluten in so many different foods, and just foods that we're used to eating, and not knowing that I had this allergy. When you think of an allergy, you think of hives, maybe itching, but my symptoms weren't that. A lot of complications that I had was a lot of stomach pain, a lot of irritable bowel type symptoms, and was very nauseous. It was interesting because I was pregnant and it was my first child, so I really didn't know or have anything to compare it to because I was never pregnant before. So a lot of it, I thought I just felt like crap all the time because I was pregnant and I was having a lot of complications in my pregnancy. I never in a million years thought that it was an allergy to gluten, a food that I've eaten my entire life. So the complications were just feeling very sick.
All right, thank you. Back to you, Ava. Thank you so much for that amazing interview, and thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and experience with us, Renee. Now, on to our next section, why celiac cases are on the rise. Now, celiac cases may be on the rise due to new testing measures that are being implemented into standard practices. People are becoming more aware of this gluten epidemic, and this exposure is leading to more diagnoses and therefore more celiac cases. Although this is not just the only reason, there may be a more scientific reason behind it. My best guess, that would be the production methods of wheat itself. Dr. Mario Magasic of South Jersey Gastroenterology feels that wheat is being mass-produced and growing in a very high concentrated manner, which is the cause for the recent uproar of celiac cases. Wheat used to be grown at 10 to 12 feet tall, but now it is being grown at a mere 12 to 15 inches high and very thick, causing its concentration level to be vastly impacted. Chances are the average human body's digestive system was not designed to ingest gluten at such staggering levels. So, why are gluten on the cases on the rise? Is it the farmers or the spread of information? We don't know. It's a medical mystery, and it's up to you and me to find out. And so, that was a simple introduction to celiac. I hope that this mini lesson helped you all to understand the truth of gluten intolerance, and let this serve as a warning. Remember to always be on the lookout for this sneaky disease. You never know when you could develop celiac. Well, that's all for now, folks. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your not-so-late night. Ava Schmalbach, out.